Dear colleagues, once again, welcome to Vienna. I'm pleased you're here at this early morning, maybe for you. We go right into our agenda. You know, time is always a little bit under pressure. So we start right away with our agenda. The draft agenda for this meeting has been distributed. I would like to ask you to adopt the agenda for this meeting. The agenda is adopted. We come to item number 2, the draft agenda item. Yes. The draft agenda for the 2017 winter meeting has also been distributed. I would like to ask you to approve the agenda for this meeting under Rule 16(1). The agenda is approved. Thank you very much. Dear Standing Committee members, dear friends, I'm particularly delighted to welcome the new delegations which are just starting their work in our Assembly. I also want to welcome new heads of the delegations from Belarus, from Croatia, from Cyprus, from Georgia, from Iceland, from Lithuania, from Mongolia, from Montenegro, from the Russian Federation, from San Marino, from Serbia, and from the United States. A special welcome goes to the delegation of Uzbekistan, which is back in our Assembly after non-participating for many years. Senator Safaev, we welcome you here as colleagues. Welcome in our middle, and look forward to our close cooperation in the future. And your presence here is a testimony of our shared vision that we parliamentarians have a great deal to contribute to the success of the OSCE. This autumn and winter season has been extremely busy for me. In keeping with the tradition, I addressed the OSCE Permanent Council here in this building on the 27th of October, as well as the Ministerial Council meeting on the 8th of December. I consider these as important opportunities and in line with my pre-election commitment to continuously work on maximizing coordination with the governmental branch. On both occasions, I called for more constructive dialogue and confidence building, highlighted the role of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in promoting people-to-people contacts, and also urged for a stronger security role for women. I also emphasized the need to develop the OSCE's mediation capacity, to which the OSCE PA, with its special representative on mediation, can make a viable contribution. I also served as special coordinator and leader of the OSCE short-time observer missions on the 8th of November during the general elections in the United States. This was the first time full-scale mission we deployed by both us and the ODIHR in the US, which comprised a total of 320 observers from 43 countries. So this was one of the largest OSCE PA elections monitoring missions, with 104 parliamentarians and staff attending. So it really was a huge delegation. I will share with you my conclusions from the mission under item 4 of the agenda. In mid-November, I paid a working visit to the UN headquarters in New York to meet Under-Secretary General Feldman and Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, Mlambo Ngcuka. Our discussions focused on regional developments of shared relevance, notably in Central Asia, Ukraine, Turkey and Eastern Europe, and considerations of venues for enhanced cooperation. By the way, the UN have opened a liaison office here in Vienna to have better contact with the OSCE. We are currently considering closer cooperation with this office. At the end of November, I visited Moscow, meeting with Federal Council Chairperson Valentina Matvienko and State Duma Deputy Chairperson Mr. Tolstoy, who is present among us today. Our talks focused on follow-up of the decisions put forward by the Assembly at its recent annual session in Tbilisi. We also discussed the Russian involvement in the work of the OSCE, the role of parliamentary diplomacy, and developments in and around the Ukraine. In November, I also addressed the NATO Parliamentary Assembly's 62nd annual session in Istanbul, focusing primarily on issues of parliamentary diplomacy and the core value of a comprehensive security approach. I was also pleased to address the IPU Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament, as well as to participate in the opening of the Austrian OSCE chairmanship here in January. It is a unique situation that both the President of the Assembly and the Chairman in office are from the same country. And I hope that this will prove to be an opportunity to further strengthen parliamentary input in OSCE affairs. My most recent official visit took place in January when I visited London, further promoting the sustained British engagement with the OSCE. I had the opportunity, among many other issues, to discuss with Peter Bounds the need to reactivate our ad hoc committee on transparency, which I intend to do so shortly. Alongside working visits, I have been actively following developments in Turkey and have voiced my concern about the situation there when I felt it was necessary. I was also shocked by the tragic assassination of Russian Ambassador Karlov. Terrorism and terrorist attacks, be it Berlin, be it Istanbul, be it Quebec, to mention but a few, have unfortunately been in the focus of my attention on far too many occasions. I, of course, also continue to follow the situation in Ukraine closely and have had the opportunity to engage in useful dialogue on several occasions, including with the Speaker of the Parliament. The conflict there requires our dedicated focus, particularly given the continued human toll of the fighting. I'm also coming to closely follow the developments around the mandate renewal of the OSCE missions in Armenia and Tajikistan. As you may have heard, the annual renewal process of the mandates of 5 OSCE missions faced some difficulties earlier this year. I have raised my concern regarding this. The chairmanship and the governmental side seem to be slowly moving in the right direction, and I strongly hope we will remain this year with the same number of missions as in 2016. I strongly believe that the field missions are the crown jewel of the OSCE, and I call on all of you to seek for solutions as you meet with your ambassadors to the OSCE here today and tomorrow, and some of them are here. This is crucial if the excellent work of the OSCE on the ground is to continue. I would also like to highlight that the Austrian Parliament, under my coordination, is organizing 2 topical conferences in the month to come. Firstly, on female perspectives on OSCE security policy on the 23rd of March, and then also a retreat on national minorities at the end of May. I warmly welcome your active participation in them. Finally, my words of appreciation go to the International Secretariat and its committed work. I'm closely following the excellent work of Secretary General Roberto Montella and Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Balares. They are preparing a comprehensive reform of the Secretariat's administration and finance, and this is really hard work to do, so thank you very much for that. Before we proceed to the next agenda item, I would of course welcome any comments you have on my report or on other topical issues. I would like to remind you that we are limited in time. The meeting must conclude at 11:45 latest. I would thus ask you to keep this in mind when taking the floor. Thank you very much for your attention. Now my question is are there any comments? Would anyone like to take the floor? Yeah. Our new colleague from Uzbekistan, please.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman, first of all, I'd like to express gratitude for your warm welcoming words. And on behalf of the Uzbek delegation, I would like to extend our warmest greetings to the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The Uzbek Parliament recognized the OSCE as the most important international body for multilateral cooperation, and it plays an indispensable role in serving as a platform for broad political dialogue, economic and humanitarian ties, maintaining peace, combating transnational threats, and protecting human rights and freedoms. There is no doubt that today, when very challenging trends are unfolding in OSCE area and adjacent regions, parliamentary diplomacy within the framework of our organization can and should play a significant role in building mutual trust and enhancing understanding between our nations. In recent years, Uzbekistan and OSCE gained a considerable amount of experience working together. To date, more than 30 joint projects in areas such as democratization, good governance, judicial reforms, and training for public sector employees have been or are being implemented. We also highly appreciate our cooperation in the electoral process. During Uzbekistan's last presidential election, for the first time, the full-fledged mission of OSCE ODHIR observers attended. Many of the mission's recommendations have been taken into account and will be implemented in our national legislation and electoral process. While describing Uzbekistan's current political development, in short, it might be defined as a process of political modernization. This vision, proposed by incumbent President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, is based on a clear understanding that no long-term sustainable development is possible without deep changes, without profound modernization of political system, and without genuine democratization. At the core of this lies the concept of decentralization of the state governance system. This isn't limited only to the top to the bottom the government prerogatives. It also means the redistribution of power and authorities between different branches of government. It also embraces the disengagement of the state from direct involvement into the economy. It contains the application of inclusive democratic principles, meaning profound partnership with the civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that interparliamentary dialogue has huge potential and might contribute a great deal to the success of this organization. Therefore, we are looking forward to enhancing our mutual cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful intervention, and welcome once again. The next speaker is Mr. Sanchez from Spain.
Thank you, President. I'm using Spanish for being so precise. Thank you. Well, querida Presidenta, gracias por su informe. Nosotros somos una organización, me refiero a la Asamblea Parlamentaria, especializada en misiones de monitoring electoral. Esa yo creo que es nuestra plusvalía y es nuestra especialidad, ganada tras muchos años de trabajo serio en esta materia de misiones electorales. Esa posición preeminente de la Asamblea Parlamentaria de la OSCE, sin embargo, se encuentra ahora aparentemente disputada, porque hay muchos otros actores internacionales participando en misiones de monitoring electoral. No todos con la misma cultura y no todos con los mismos resultados. Yo creo que el intento de Roberto Montella, de nuestro secretario general, desde el punto de vista de la parte técnica del monitoring electoral, con la reunión que se celebró en Dinamarca hace unos meses, consiguió ahormar algunos aspectos técnicos de la coordinación entre todos esos actores en las misiones de monitoring electoral. Y nosotros, por otra parte, en el nivel político, hemos podido conocer las consecuencias de alguna ligereza de alguna otra entidad internacional en las misiones electorales y hemos mantenido una exquisita y precisa cultura de la neutralidad política. Yo creo que ese es un elemento esencial de nuestro buen desempeño en las misiones electorales. Una neutralidad política que nos sale de modo natural, que no hay que forzar, que no hay que buscar extrañas combinaciones, porque está en la cultura política de nuestra Asamblea esa cultura de la neutralidad cuando se trata de trabajar en monitoring electoral. Yo creo que estamos viendo los graves problemas que otros actores internacionales tienen y creo que se debe hacernos permanecer en esta posición de neutralidad política, continuar así para seguir manteniendo una preeminencia que en este momento creo que vuelve a ser indiscutida precisamente porque hemos trabajado así. Y un segundo asunto que me parece de una importancia política extraordinaria, querida Presidenta. Nosotros somos un organismo de seguridad, somos un organismo compuesto por parlamentarios y somos un organismo especializado en elecciones. Parlamento, elecciones y seguridad. Todo el mundo seguramente sabe de qué voy a comenzar a hablar. La seguridad en las elecciones. La seguridad en las elecciones frente a posibles ciberataques a los sistemas informáticos ligados a las elecciones y seguridad en las elecciones por las posibles interferencias de entidades ajenas al país que tiene elecciones en sus campañas electorales. Hemos visto con un cierto asombro que un país tan avanzado como Holanda anuncia que en sus elecciones va a hacer un recuento manual, lápiz y papel, seguramente porque esas preocupaciones que todos compartimos también lo son de las autoridades holandesas. Hemos visto fenómenos en campañas electorales en las cuales el valor de la verdad comienza a disolverse. Cualquier noticia falsa adecuadamente difundida puede influir en el electorado y yo creo que el asunto de la seguridad en las elecciones y la seguridad en las campañas frente a interferencias ajenas a los propios actores de la campaña debe estar muy alto en nuestra agenda política de los próximos años. Y por tanto creo que debemos conjurarnos para tratar este asunto y yo quiero anunciar que propondré un punto suplementario para el debate del verano para tratar el asunto de la ciberseguridad en las elecciones parlamentarias. Nada más y muchas gracias.
Thank you for raising these important issues. We take note of that and we will discuss it. Thank you. The next speaker is our colleague from Armenia. Please.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемые коллеги, заседание парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ может стать воистину историческим по той простой причине, что сейчас мир оказался в очень тяжелой, напряженной ситуации. Чтобы не драматизировать, я приведу лишь выдержки из издания The Independent. Итак, в начале этого года это издание, ссылаясь на данные компании YouGov, опубликовала, что 64% опрошенных американцев уверены, что будет Третья мировая война. Согласно данным этого же издания и этой же исследовательской компании, такого же мнения придерживается 61% опрошенных британцев, 58% опрошенных французов. Более того, Левада-центр опубликовал данные исследований, согласно которым 48% россиян уверены, что ситуация, если не будет переломлена в Сирии, она может перерасти в Третью мировую войну. Согласно данным Гэллап, 67% россиян видят прямую угрозу своей безопасности со стороны НАТО. В этих условиях перед нами открывается очень интересная перспектива в связи с выборами в Соединенных Штатах Америки. Я обращаюсь к сенатору Уикеру. Надо всемерно воспользоваться высказываниями новоизбранного президента США о его готовности сотрудничать с Россией, с Европой с целью искоренения международного терроризма. Тем более, если ответ из России устами президента Владимира Путина был положительным. И мне кажется, что гвоздем всего нашего зимнего заседания должна быть выработка таких подходов и мотивов, чтобы лидеры вышеназванных государств, центры силы мировой политики знали, что в лице парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ мы имеем надежного оплота в борьбе против международного терроризма, в борьбе за мир и сотрудничество. Нынешняя команда парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ во главе с президентом Мутонен, заместителями президента и руководителями делегаций, она вполне способна дать всему миру импульс того, что мы будем решительны в борьбе за мир и безопасность. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Now, our colleague from Switzerland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, the presidency, your predecessor and yourself, our standing committee here in Vienna 1 year ago, decided to put the issue of migration on the top of our priorities. We also decided to create an ad hoc working group, being this issue issue between the three committees which are dealing with security or human rights or economic and social issues. It is clear, and it was a priority for everybody. And 1 year after, maybe we hear less in the news about migration issues, casualties and refugees, but the problem is not solved. We know very well how many millions people are around. We know that many countries are still having problems. And we know that not having solutions, the next crisis will create exactly the same problem. So the bad politicians always react when the crisis is there. Trying to prevent a crisis should be the task of good politicians. Now, I'm thankful that our Parliamentary Assembly understands it, and we will deliver. I'm chairing this working group. We will deliver our report, well, an intermediate report today, but a more complete report in Minsk in the annual meeting with a supplementary item and some resolutions we would like them to share with all our colleagues. And we hope, of course, on the support of the presidency in this work. The question I wanted to ask you, Mrs. Chair, the same happened at ministerial level, and the German chairmanship requested to establish an informal working group on migration flows, which has been working 1 year long, delivering his report with about 50 recommendations in the Hamburg Ministerial Council, where unfortunately, due to some blockades, it was not possible to adopt this report. And the outcome of Hamburg, I don't know if my dear colleagues have been able to read it, is one page where, well, at least it's there. We can say OSCE is also present on the migration debate. But frankly speaking, this page is disappointing when we think to the importance of the problem and the proposals which were in the previous report. So my question to you, Mrs. Chair, is are we ready, are you ready as chairing this Parliamentary Assembly to try once again, not only to make our work with resolutions and supplementary items in the Assembly, but also to try and find a better cooperation cooperation with the ministerial side, with the governments, in order to push this issue really forward and try to reach some minimal agreements on solutions which are of great importance for millions of people. Thank you, Mrs. Chair.
Thank you very much. Very important issue, and we will try and do our best in that sense. I think that the Parliamentary Assembly can here be something like a lighting fire, because we can make decisions and we don't have the consensus. So in that sense, I'm very much looking forward to continue, and thank you for your work, to continuing with this work. Thank you. There is no more speakers, so we move on, dear colleagues, to item number 4, which is reports and information on activities of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. The election observation missions. Colleagues, we had another intensive election observation calendar since our standing committee met in Skopje. Written reports of these missions are available. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly provided leadership to election observation missions to Georgia, Montenegro, Moldova, the United States, and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, so quite a lot, even after the Skopje meeting. Due to time constraints, I would only ask the mission's special coordinators who are present here today to brief us on these election missions. If those of you who headed the OSCE PA observer teams would also like to speak, let me please know. We will hear all the reports after concluding. And after concluding, I will open the floor for comments related to the observation missions. I would like to call now and start with Mr. Ignacio Sanchez Amor on the Georgia election observation mission. The floor is yours, please.
Gracias, Presidenta. Ha sido un honor servir de nuevo como coordinador especial en las elecciones parlamentarias de Georgia, que se mantuvieron en 2 rondas, el 8 de octubre y el 30 de octubre. He sido acompañado por nuestro colega Guglielmo Picchi y también por miembros del Parlamento Europeo, del Consejo de Europa y de la NATO. Un par de semanas antes de las elecciones, el colega Picchi y yo mismo hicimos una visita previa para conocer todos los preparativos del Gobierno y de la Administración electoral y tener las primeras entrevistas con los actores políticos. Debo decir que en todo momento, en un largo proceso que conoció 3 visitas diferentes, tuvimos como siempre el excelente apoyo profesional y amigable de todos los colegas de ODIR, dirigidos por el embajador Kielczewski. La cooperación entre los representantes de las instituciones que estábamos presentes en Georgia, debo decir que fue amigable, cálida y cordial. Pero al mismo tiempo debo decir que con el representante del Consejo de Europa, sin dejar de ser cálida y cordial, no fue fácil. No fue fácil porque había una aproximación a las elecciones que tenía una cierta contaminación partidaria que el resto de los colegas tratamos de bloquear, pero fue una situación no fácil que provocaba reuniones largas y repetidas para volver a asuntos que estaban debatidos por el resto de los colegas. En cualquier caso, las conclusiones fueron que las elecciones habían permitido competir libremente a los candidatos y a los electores hacer una elección informada y se confirmaron las conclusiones en la segunda ronda de que las elecciones habían sido administradas de una manera competente y respetando los derechos de los candidatos y de los votantes. No obstante, una campaña en un ambiente abierto, hubo, como es habitual, alegaciones frecuentes de mal uso de recursos públicos y hubo sobre todo algunos incidentes violentos, algunos que se produjeron meses antes de las elecciones en el ámbito de rallies de reuniones políticas e incluso una bomba en el coche de un candidato creo que fue 3 días antes de las elecciones, de tal manera que nuestros expertos de seguridad, aparte de informarnos sobre nuestra seguridad, tuvieron que hacernos un curso acelerado sobre efectos y dirección de la explosión y technicalities sobre la bomba en el coche del candidato. Nosotros apreciamos que hay en la cultura política del país prácticas que deben ser rechazadas. Por ejemplo, la práctica de enviar matones o de enviar grupos de provocadores de un partido a las reuniones políticas de otros partidos, y algo que desgraciadamente parece frecuente en la cultura política del país, el uso de filtraciones, de grabaciones telefónicas y de vídeos que afectaban a conversaciones políticas e incluso a la vida privada de personas de la política. Nuestra posición ha sido clarísima, es sencillamente inaceptable. Si Georgia quiere ser una democracia madura, tiene que acabar con ese tipo de prácticas, por mucho que hayan sido frecuentes o habituales en el pasado. El día de las elecciones fue generalmente ordenado, aunque hubo algunos incidentes violentos aislados el día 8 de octubre en la primera ronda, y no obstante encontramos una mejora, una mejor profesionalidad en la segunda ronda por parte de la administración electoral. Tuvimos que hacer una crítica muy dura a los actores políticos de Georgia, porque horas antes de cerrar los colegios, varios actores políticos importantes salían a la televisión hablando de que las elecciones estaban falseadas, desacreditando el proceso electoral sin que se hubiera contado ni un solo voto, horas antes del cierre de los colegios. Igualmente, como los otros temas, si Georgia quiere asentar la madurez de su democracia, y obviamente la dirección es una dirección excelente, tiene que acabar con este tipo de prácticas. El informe completo lleva recomendaciones muy importantes de ODIHR, que yo creo que las autoridades de Georgia tomarán con toda la seriedad. Se pretenden algunos cambios legislativos y técnicos, pero yo creo que sobre todo los actores políticos tienen que moderar, permítame la ironía, el entusiasmo con el que acuden a las elecciones y ir a unas campañas mucho más tranquilas. Fue una elección en la que hubo 576 observadores de 40 países, y yo creo que sigue siendo un importante elemento de cómo la OSCE sigue haciendo un trabajo excelente con la ayuda de ODIHR en ambientes no siempre tranquilos y fáciles. Gracias.
Thank you very much. We come to the next election and the report about it. Ms. Margareta Sederfeld, please. You had the election observation mission to Montenegro. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam President. First of all, thanks for appointing me as a special coordinator to lead a short-term election observation mission for the 16 October parliamentarian election in Montenegro. My colleague Asay Guliev from Azerbaijan, also vice president of this assembly, was appointed to lead the PA delegation. And the PA delegation consists of more than 40 parliamentarians and staff from more than 20 countries. In our observations efforts, we were joined by the OSCE ODIHR long-term observation mission led by Mr. Roman Jeksic from Slovenia, as well as a delegation of the Parliamentarian Assembly of Council of Europe, headed by Mr. Alexander Pociej from Poland. Prior to election day, I and Asay had a number of high-level meetings, including the President of Montenegro, the Speaker of the Parliament, and the Prime Minister. We did also meet with the OSCE mission to Montenegro and received a comprehensive briefing on preparation for election and their activities. Overall, our main conclusion were that the election were held in a competitive environment and fundamental freedom were generally respected, but the campaign was characterized by a lack of distinct domestic policy alternatives and was permitted by personal attacks. While pluralistic, the media lacked editorial independence and political investigative and deep reporting, limiting the analytic information available to voters. Election day proceeded in a calm and orderly manner, with a few cases of procedural irregularities observed. But I also want to mention here that there were one incident on the election day that could have been a serious incident, but it was handled efficient and didn't have any other impacts on the election day. It was an attack on the president, and you have read about it in the media afterwards. And also the conduct of voting and counting were generally assessed as positive, but in a small number of polling stations, procedures were not always followed. And on the 25th of January, did OSCE ODIHR publish their final report of the election observation mission for this election. Among the report's recommendation is undertaking electoral reforms with the aim to harmonize election legislation internally and with other relevant laws, increasing the transparency and accountability of the election administration, as well as streamlining of legal framework with respect to media coverage and requirements for voting, gender balance within the party structures. And in conclusion, I want to thank all the people and the authorities of Montenegro for their welcome to our observation. And I also want to thank all that we were given unrestricted invitation to our institutions, received to observe these elections. And it is now important that all parties come together to help and assist Montenegro to continue their path towards reform and integration in the European Union, which was one of the topic for the election. And I also want to thank all the observers from the organizations who took part in the election mission. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you very much. As I have mentioned earlier, I served myself as the special coordinator for the election observation mission to the United States. I took the decision to personally lead the observation mission to the elections in the United States, primarily to emphasize the importance our assembly attached to this mission. As I mentioned, it was for the first time in the United States that both our assembly and the ODIHR developed full observation mission. And the cooperation, I really have to say, the cooperation between the ODIHR and the assembly was excellent. The OSCE deployed quite a lot of members going for the elections, more than 290 observers, and there were about 100 parliamentarians observing the elections, and you can say that they were visiting more than 900 polling stations across the country. So really a very big delegation doing a lot of work. Our main conclusions were that the elections on the 8th of November were highly competitive and demonstrated a commitment to fundamental freedom of expression, assembly and association. We noted that the diverse and extensive media coverage allowed voters to make an informed choice. However, the presidential campaign was characterized by harsh personal attacks as well as intolerant rhetoric by one candidate. On the 8th of January, the OSCE ODIHR published a final report of the election observation missions for these elections. Among the report's recommendations is reviewing of the election-related legal framework with respect to the equality of the voting rights for all citizens, redistricting, representation rights in Congress, and campaign finance. The report also calls for legal access in all states to international observers invited by the US authorities. So we were invited, but we didn't have access in all the different states. Finally, I want to thank Makis Voridis for his leadership of the OSCE PA observer team during this mission, as well as all of you that participated in this mission and contributed to our work. We move on to the next election, and I would call on Ms. Arta Dade, please, to report on your conclusion from the Moldova election observation mission.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was appointed a special coordinator to lead the elections observation mission for the presidential elections in Moldova, which took place on the 30th of October and 13th November 2016. My colleague Geir-Jørgen Bekkevold from Norway led a PA delegation that consisted in 34 parliamentarians and staff from 16 countries in the first round and 11 parliamentarians and staff from 7 countries in the second round. I thank Geir for his commitment and the excellent job. In our observation efforts, we were joined by the OSCE ODIHR long-term observation mission led by Douglas Wake from the United States, and we had an excellent cooperation with ODIHR, as well as a delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, headed by Elisabeth Schneider-Schneider from Switzerland, and a delegation from the European Parliament led by Igor Šoltes from Slovenia. I would like to thank the people of Moldova and the authorities for their warm hospitality. We were very well received in polling stations, and I was impressed by the dedicated work of citizens on the election day. Overall, our main conclusions were that Moldova's first direct presidential election in 20 years provided citizens with ample opportunity to express their preference for a new head of state. The campaign, taking place against a background of economic hardship and a climate of mistrust in state institutions, was competitive and fundamental freedoms were respected. However, the process was marred by widespread abuse of administrative resources, lack of campaign finance transparency, and unbalanced media coverage. For both rounds, the election administration led by the Central Election Commission worked in an open manner and within the legal deadlines. Technical preparations were generally administered in a professional manner. However, despite some efforts to prepare for a high turnout in some specific polling stations abroad and for voters from Transnistria, many citizens were unable to vote in the second round because of the ballots allocated to these polling stations proved insufficient. Polling was very positively assessed with key procedures followed. The assessment of the counting was less positive primarily due to procedural irregularities. The tabulation process was prompt and transparent, but inadequate facilities for tabulating the results in some district electoral councils led to small-scale tensions. Candidate representatives and observers were largely able to follow all stages of voting, counting and tabulation without restriction. Over those 2 weekends, I was impressed to see the citizens of Moldova participate in the electoral process. This is a proof that Moldovans want an active voice in significant decisions about their country. I was particularly impressed to see how well represented women were in lower-level election administration bodies, including in leadership positions. To summarize our conclusions, Moldovan voters were provided with real choices in a competitive campaign, but some negative aspects of the process, if not addressed, could further undermine voters' trust that their voices are being heard. The more intense campaign in the lead-up to the second round succeeded in mobilizing a greater number of voters. Overall, this underlies a desire for continued civic mobilization, and I encourage the new president to support the reforms that have been initiated to restore public confidence in state institutions and ensure the country's stability. Last week, the OSCE ODIHR published their final report on the elections with detailed recommendations to address the shortcomings we identified during our observation. I encourage the Moldovan authorities to continue improving their electoral framework in line with these recommendations, and I reiterate our readiness to assist our colleagues in Moldovan Parliament in that endeavor. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I wanted to call now Mr. Roberto Patelli, but he is unfortunately not able to present his report on the election observation mission in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. However, he has produced a written report which is available to you. Thank you very much. So we come to the questions, the question whether there are any questions or comments. So we have Senator Vika, please.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank you and Mr. Vouridis for leading the observation delegation. We very much appreciated your presence and that of every member of this very sizable OSCE PA delegation. I was happy to facilitate presentations in Washington to members of the delegation from former Congressman Tom Davis of Virginia and, of course, our colleague Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. I think Congressman Davis would want me to mention as a point of pride for him that he was one of the few presenters who actually predicted the upset victory of Mr. Trump, and so I will give him an acknowledgement that he was perhaps more prescient than many of the pundits who we were listening to during the election. The overall evaluation of the OSCE PA report has been appreciated by our delegation. It mentioned the competitive environment, the free and diverse media, the unrestricted access to the courts, and of course we observed the criticisms and suggestions for improvement in the report, including negative campaigning, room for improvement in campaign finance, particularly with regard to transparency, enfranchisement, and voter registration issues. Of course, one thing that international observers should understand about our election process is that much of the law with regard to the conduct of the elections in a presidential race involves rules in the 50 states. In essence, we have 50 separate elections for the Electoral College. There are even county and local government rules that clearly the federal courts have jurisdiction to review, but it is 50 state elections, and that gave us the result of the Electoral College. Reports that Russian authorities acted to influence the U.S. elections through cyber activity have been so widely circulated and publicized that there's no reason to pretend the issue does not exist. It is, in fact, mentioned in the final OSCE report on the elections authored by our president. I conclude by urging this assembly to denounce efforts by any country deliberately and maliciously to undermine the public trust in democratic institutions and processes, or to attempt directly to manipulate election results. I would also urge those other countries holding elections in the coming months and years to be extremely vigilant in protecting themselves from outside cyber attacks, and this, of course, has already been mentioned earlier in the debate this morning. But finally, let me say, an outside perspective is always helpful and welcome, and it was welcome in the United States of America. There's every reason for all nations to welcome this sort of OSCE, PA, and ODIHR observation, and we were delighted to have our guests in the United States for this important event. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. We have more people asking for the floor. Our colleague from the Ukraine, please.
Dear colleagues, Spanish delegation raised an issue about election observation, and I would like to stress that OSCE ODIHR has developed the best methodology for election observation, and we have to keep this methodology, and for sure not all the international missions from other organizations could work and could organize the activity based on Copenhagen document, all other international documents, and to respect sovereignty of different countries. Last December, final report about election observation of State Duma election in Russia was published. Ukraine appreciates that OSCE did not send observers to unlegally occupied territory of Crimea. It's correct. But unfortunately, in final report, there were no single words about this process, that official observation were not conducted in Crimea based on all the decisions of OSCE. And Ukrainian parliament is deeply concerned about it, and we would like to recommend that in all similar situations in the future to mention this technical thing as technical aspect, maybe in introduction part, at least introduction part of election observation reports, and it will respect sovereignty of our country and other countries. And for sure we hope that personalities elected on these so-called elections will not participate in our official events or official dialogues, but we still would like to stress that we are ready to continue our peaceful dialogue, and we thank OSCE for all the effort supporting peace process in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. We come to the next speaker, who is from Azerbaijan, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I have been entrusted to lead the OSCE delegation to Montenegro, as well as in the Macedonia, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Of course, it was a little bit coinciding decision because Macedonian election supposed to be taking place a little bit earlier, but it was postponed 3 times. At least it conducted in 11th of December. Since our colleague, Mr. Roberto Battieri, is not attending this meeting, and I hope that you will get the written report about the Macedonian elections, the result of the Macedonian election. And I think this election took after 2 years of deep political crisis, and there were a lot of expectations from the result of the elections. And what was important for the Macedonian electorates and the people, that all the political forces came together and they agreed to have the election, at least to put an end to the political crisis. Of course, we can talk about achievements of the election in former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Particularly, I would say the campaign was competitive, and significant improvements to the electoral legislation in 2015 addressed most previous OSCE recommendations. And also election day proceeded in an orderly manner and without any incidents. Of course, we also must talk about some gaps, weaknesses that really needs to be addressed, which is about the election environment that mainly characterized by public mistrust and mistrust in institutions and the political establishment. Of course, we do hope that the professionality of the electoral state election commission will be improved in the future in order to meet all the deadline and other requirements. And talking about the Montenegro election, of course, Madam Sederfer has already submitted her report, but during this clarification I wanted to deliver to our distinguished members, which is about the information on attempt to the president, but according to the official information of Macedonian sources, it was an attempt to assassinate the Prime Minister, Mr. Milo Đukanović, but luckily it was suppressed, and it was, stopped by appropriate state agents of Montenegro. But I think Montenegro people made very crucial decisions in terms of determination the future geopolitical course of the country. I think now Montenegrins can really enjoy their choice and they go forward. At the end, Madam Chair, I would like to thank to our Secretariat, International Secretariat, for their great job. Particularly, I want to mention Irina Savashuk, Francesco Pagani, Maria Ciperina, and of course our Ambassador Andres Notelli for their great assistance to the staff and to the head of the mission, as well as to all the members of our assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have our colleague from Iceland. Ireland, Ireland.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Lisa Chambers. I'm a pretty new member to the OSCE PA from the Irish delegation, and it was my first election observer mission to the United States. So I felt it appropriate to make a comment to say to you, Madam President, that I thought it was very well organised. From the moment that we landed in Washington for training, I certainly felt well equipped to do my duties as an election observer. The Irish delegation were then posted to the state of New York, and as was mentioned earlier, it was 50 different elections, 50 different states, and it certainly posed a significant challenge to our organisation to run an efficient and proper election observer mission across all states with varying degrees, I suppose, of access and differing laws. I'm glad that the report mentioned the personal attacks. Certainly I felt there was far more focus on the individual candidates rather than the policies which they were advocating, and I think that clouds the judgment of voters. There were two particular aspects of the election for me that posed a significant challenge to democracy and something that I think our organisation needs to address. One is the advent of fake news, the ability of a candidate or a candidate's team to put into the public domain things they are asserting as factual, but are in fact untrue. The inability then of the media, the inability of the other candidate and the candidate's team to actually correct the record, so the public are believing information that is actually not true. And I think this poses a significant challenge to every democracy worldwide, and it is something that I think our organisation should look to maybe address or do something as an organisation to look at this issue and perhaps put forward recommendations in that regard. As has already been touched upon, the alleged intervention by another state in potential cyber attacks. Again, this poses a very significant threat to all democracies worldwide, and as an organisation representing so many different countries and democracies, again, I think this is a very significant issue that we must address. I want to finish, Madam Chairperson, by thanking the United States for facilitating the observer mission, and in particular to thank the State of New York for facilitating the Irish delegation and doing our work. Certainly as a first-time observer, it was a very significant and interesting election to observe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the items. The thanks I pass on to the Secretariat. The next speaker is from Sweden.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to follow up what Mr. Wicker said about the vulnerability of elections and actually how we are kind of facing a new era when it comes to elections. And this is actually a broader question than just the matter of intervention by illegal intervention by outside hackers, etc. But we also need to reflect upon the work we are doing ourselves. We now see how the work we are doing is changing. In many places, instead of we sitting, observing, counting in polling stations, actually more and more are starting to use machines. And the traditional way we have been working for so long in this assembly is about to change. The counting and maybe soon also the electoral process will be more used by machines. So it's not just about the matter that Mr. Wicker rose about hackers, etc., but it's also the way we are performing our duties. What is tomorrow's elections? Will it be electronic? Will we do it from our homes? Will it be done by different kind of electronic ID? We can be maybe abroad when we are voting, etc. We are definitely on the verge of a new era. I have been now in several elections where actually the counting have taken 30 minutes. Several of us have been sitting way up until the early morning observing counting in several countries. But we can see how fast things are changing now. And we might reflect whether it's democracies or non-democracies that will achieve this ability to use the modern technology fastest, but it's definitely challenging us as election observers and monitors of elections. And I think it would be in place that, taking both what Mr. Wicker said and what I'm saying, that there should be some maybe group working with these thoughts about elections of tomorrow. The integrity of elections, but also how technology and the way of changes of elections will actually challenging us and the way we are working. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're right. We are certainly at a crucial time of change. We have another speaker from Georgia, please.
Thank you very much. As a new chair of the delegation, let me first of all thank you very much for your warm welcome and express my gratitude to the observation mission to take a part in Georgia in October in the election observation process, which we may very much appreciate and value. This was a very important election for Georgia, and the reports that were produced by the observation missions clearly highlighted one important point, that Georgia has again confirmed and reaffirmed its status as the leader of democratic transformation in the region. And let me reassure you that Georgia is fully committed to continue to consolidate democracy, and we would very much appreciate cooperation with our partners, with you, to continue this path. And I look forward to working with you and our partners in future, and obviously to consider all the shortcomings that have been mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move on to Germany. Doris.
Vielen Dank, Frau Vorsitzende. Was Kent Harstedt uns eben gesagt hat über die Zukunft der Wahlen und wie wir Wahlen beobachten, da möchte ich noch etwas anfügen, was wir bedenken sollten, weil wir das gerade auch in Deutschland gesetzlich neu geregelt haben. Wer wird von Wahlen ausgeschlossen? Welche Bevölkerungsgruppe? Wir haben ja zum Beispiel Behinderte. Dürfen die wählen? Bis zu welcher Behinderung dürfen sie wählen? Darf jemand ihnen helfen zu wählen? Aber das ist dann auch wieder Sache der einzelnen Länder, kann aber mitunter auch zu entsprechenden Wahlergebnissen führen. Das ist nur ein kleines Seitenproblem, aber ich glaube, wir sollten es nicht ganz unter den Teppich kehren. Es könnte, wenn man zum Beispiel die Bevölkerungsgruppe derjenigen, die im Gefängnis sitzt, wegen welchen Taten auch immer, solange sie ihre bürgerlichen Ehrenrechte nicht aberkannt bekommen haben, sollten sie wählen dürfen. Nimmt man ihnen das Wahlrecht, dann hat man vielleicht gleich, je nachdem wie groß das Land ist, eine größere Menge Wähler, die gar nicht daran teilnehmen dürfen. Vielleicht können wir uns hier mal wenigstens ein paar Gedanken machen. Dass wir das jetzt alles über einen Kamm scheren und sagen, so muss es überall gemacht werden, ist natürlich auch eher unwahrscheinlich, denn wir haben gar nicht die Autorität. Aber dass wir uns als Vertreter unserer Länder wenigstens mal Gedanken darüber machen, wäre sicherlich hilfreich. Danke.
Thank you very much. We come to the next speaker from Canada.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. C'est avec attention que j'ai écouté la déléguée de Madame Barnett de l'Allemagne concernant le droit de vote. Dans une démocratie, à moins d'être frappé par une interdiction judiciaire, tout le monde a droit de vote. Et au niveau des handicapés, des personnes handicapées, que ce soit physiques, aveugles, chez nous au Canada, il y a une loi qui les protège. Et nous avons l'obligation de s'assurer que ces personnes votent et il y a un cadre juridique qui encadre bien le processus. Et ça existe depuis au-delà de 100 ans et jamais on a eu de problème. Je pense que c'est un code très facile à appliquer dans les démocraties, puisque le droit de vote, c'est sacré en démocratie. Ce n'est pas maniable, ce n'est pas achetable ni vendable. Ça demeure l'essence même d'une démocratie. Merci.
Thank you very much. We come to our next speaker from Russia, Mr. Kovalev. Please.
Спасибо. Я бы хотел начать со слов благодарности в адрес председателя, в адрес секретариата, потому что мы видим, насколько возросла активность парламентской дипломатии. Спасибо огромное. Это очень важный аспект нашей работы. Я хотел в реплике сказать об одном. Мы все понимаем, что такое выборы и как они влияют на демократические преобразования не только в стране, где эти выборы проходят, но и в целом в мире. И сегодня мы видим эти угрозы. Как же мы, Парламентская ассамблея ОБСЕ, реагируем на эти угрозы? Вы знаете, я проведу короткую аналогию. Сейчас мы видим эту угрозу совершенно четко, связанную с кибератаками, с киберпреступностью. Потому что я бы провел такую параллель. По сути своей, это тот же терроризм в области политики. Это террор с точки зрения попытки привести к власти то правительство и тех руководителей, которые устраивают тех, кто эти атаки организуют. 6 лет назад в Парламентской ассамблее НАТО я предложил создать специальную рабочую группу по борьбе с киберпреступностью. Потому что анализ совместный показал, что 70% атак, кибератак, происходит с территории Китая. Сегодня техника настолько совершенна, что можно зарегистрироваться из любой точки, из любой страны и организовать эту атаку. К сожалению, в политическом плане, вот и сегодня мы стали свидетелями подобного рода выступлений, все эти атаки пытаются связать с Россией. Давайте мы объективно разберемся в ситуации. Вот 3 года назад в этом зале я предложил создать комитет по борьбе с терроризмом. Что мне ответили коллеги? Давайте взвесим, подойдем последовательно к этой задаче и скажем свое мнение. Прошло 3 года. Сегодня, я думаю, кстати, я и в Тбилиси озвучивал эту идею, и предложил создать специальный комитет по борьбе с терроризмом на основе парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ. Кто будет его возглавлять? Какие функции? Это дело секретариата. И я ожидал вдумчивого ответа и вдумчивой работы в этом направлении. Терроризм ширится, терроризм растет, территория тьмы расширяется. Мы же пока безнадежно опаздываем. Так вот, сегодня настала пора, на мой взгляд, попытаться объединить эти комитеты и для того, чтобы мы оперировали объективной информацией, создать комитет по борьбе с терроризмом и комитет по борьбе с киберпреступностью, чтобы мы могли с вами на основе абсолютно объективных данных здесь принимать решения, осуждая или предъявляя претензии той или иной стране. Сегодня, к сожалению, все ушло в область информационных атак. А ведь это порождает неверие и недоверие людей к той информации, которая сегодня бродит по страницам интернет-изданий, в информационной сфере и излагается средствами массовой информации в зависимости от политических воззрений той или иной страны. Я поддерживаю и разделяю озабоченность, которая была высказана господином Санчесом, господином Викерсом. Мне кажется, настала пора нам принимать решения на основе, еще раз подчеркну, объективных данных, которые мы должны получить, проанализировать и уже на основании этих сведений принимать решения и озвучивать те или иные аспекты. Вот такие вот соображения, высказанные, я себе позволил высказать. И хочу сказать еще одно. Там, где нарушаются демократические принципы выборов, там неминуемо растет и террор, там неминуемо растет экстремизм, и страны расплачиваются жизнями своих граждан. Наша задача – объединиться и совместно противодействовать этому. Россия готова к сотрудничеству, готова разговаривать языком фактов, языком объективной информации, которую мы вместе проанализируем, вместе дадим ей оценку. Вот к такой работе мы готовы. Спасибо большое за внимание.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from Spain, Nacho, please.
Gracias, Presidenta. Es cierto que el colega Kovalev nos pidió hace 2 años, creo que fue, la creación de un grupo sobre terrorismo, puesto que su responsabilidad entre nosotros es precisamente el combate al terrorismo. Pero yo creo que no sería útil, con independencia de la pertinencia o no de alguna subcomisión sobre terrorismo y dentro de esa comisión o grupo de trabajo sobre ciberterrorismo, yo creo que no debemos mezclar 2 cosas. Una cosa es el cibercrimen económico, en el cual crees que estás comprando un producto por internet y al final tu tarjeta de crédito ha sido hackeada. Eso es algo preocupante, desde luego, pero que en lo que respecta a nuestra organización como organización de parlamentarios y especializada en las elecciones es un asunto muy diferente de los ciberataques a la seguridad y la fiabilidad de los datos electorales. Yo no dudo de que sea útil tener una comisión o algún grupo de trabajo sobre ciberterrorismo, pero por favor, esto no es respecto de nosotros cualquier tipo de delito cometido por la red. Esto ataca esencialmente, como decía Ken Harstedt, nuestra forma de trabajar. Nosotros podemos estar pasando horas rellenando nuestros formularios y pasando horas en los recuentos hasta altas horas de la madrugada, y a miles de kilómetros una persona con un ordenador puede estar falseando los datos si ha conseguido hackear el servicio técnico que ayuda a las elecciones. Por tanto, son 2 asuntos completamente distintos. Yo no entro en la pertinencia o no del grupo que propone el colega Kovalev, pero el asunto de la seguridad y la ciberseguridad en las elecciones y el asunto del uso de las noticias falsas transmitidas por la red para condicionar la opinión pública, creo que son asuntos de una naturaleza en lo que respecta a nosotros completamente diferente, porque van al corazón de nuestra credibilidad como organización cuando hacemos monitoring electoral. Porque podemos haber hecho ese esfuerzo, haber hecho 2 visitas, tener desplegados en el país 500 observadores. Si al final un hacker consigue modificar los resultados electorales, habremos quedado en ridículo ante la comunidad internacional. Nada más.
Thank you very much. The Secretariat took note of all the ideas and the thoughts that had been coming now, and I want to thank you all for this very interesting discussion. I think we have a lot of food for thought to take with us and keep on working on that. Looking ahead to the spring, the Assembly will observe the upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia on the 2nd of April. I have nominated Mr. Sanchez Amor, who is also the chair of the General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions, to lead the short-term OSCE observer mission, and Mr. Geir-Jørgen Bekkevold from Norway will be the head of the OSCE Parliamentary Observer Delegation. We expect a delegation of around 60 members. We also plan to monitor the elections in Albania in June. Are there any questions regarding planning for these upcoming election activities? If there are questions, so please contact the Secretariat. Thank you very much. We now come to another point, to the ad hoc committees, and I would now give the floor to Mrs. Arta Dade, who is heading the parliamentary team on Moldova. Arta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I'm happy to report on the work of the parliamentary team on Moldova since our annual session last July. In Tbilisi, I proposed a supplementary item on the Republic of Moldova in collaboration with our members of the parliamentary team on Moldova. Our text welcomed the German chairmanship in office effort to revitalize the Transnistrian settlement process and the active approach spearheaded by the then special representative for the Transnistrian settlement process, Ambassador Kurt Meyer-Claude, and the OSCE mission to Moldova led by Ambassador Michael Scanlan, which had largely contributed to unifying the position of the mediators and observers in the settlement process. The supplementary item also encouraged our partners in Chisinau to elaborate a clear vision for a special legal status for Transnistria and to promote an inclusive society by strengthening the functionality of the Gaugauz autonomy. Discussions with the delegation of Moldova led to a balanced text, underscoring the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's commitment to peace, stability and the rule of law in Moldova, and to finding a peaceful and sustainable solution to the Transnistrian conflict. I'm again grateful to my colleagues for their positive contributions and for agreeing to this important addition to the Tbilisi Declaration. Before electoral campaign put a hiatus on our activities, I visited Chisinau upon the invitation of the Parliament of Moldova to celebrate the country's 25th anniversary of independence. This was the occasion to reiterate the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's readiness to assist both our partners in the Parliament of Moldova and the OSCE mission to Moldova. I've already reported on our findings during the electoral observation mission and will therefore not go into details once more. I simply want to thank again my colleagues for their valuable contribution and, of course, our highly qualified staff who has assisted us from the International Secretariat. Their strong participation was a testimony to the importance the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly attaches to Moldova. Since I last reported to the Standing Committee, we have witnessed a change in leadership, both in Chisinau and Tiraspol. I have engaged with both Mr. Dodan and Krasnolescu on separate occasions last year, and I'm encouraged that for the first time in 9 years, the President of the Republic of Moldova and the Transnistrian leader met last month and expressed the need to intensify intensified talks on the transition settlement process. As stated by the OSCE chairperson in office and Austrian Foreign Minister, Sebastian Kurz, during his recent visit to Moldova, the international community remains united and committed behind the result-oriented approach promoted in 2016 under the German chairmanship. I encourage the sides to stay focused on implementing the Berlin Protocol, signed by the sides last June, to solve a number of concrete issues to improve the lives of citizens on both sides of the Dniester River. These small success stories are essential to demonstrate progress and a desire to resolve outstanding issues. I remain convinced that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can play an important role in assisting the Transnistrian settlement process. Our combined experience offers a unique perspective and expertise in a number of the practical areas which are of mutual interest to both sides to the conflict. Together with my colleagues from the parliamentary team on Moldova, I will explore opportunities for further OSCE-PA engagement with Chisinau and Tiraspol this spring, and I continue to encourage every delegation in our Parliamentary Assembly to contribute to our work and propose ways the OSCE-PA can supplement the effort of the international community. I look forward to reporting on our progress during our annual session in Minsk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We come to the next speaker, Mr. Filippo Lombardi. He is the chair of the ad hoc committee on migration. Please.
Thank you, Madam. Since I last reported to you in Skopje, our committee, composed of 18 members of Parliament, traveled to Brussels and Geneva for a series of briefings with officials of the European Union, the International Committee of Red Cross, the International Organization for Migration, and the UNHCR. The result of these meetings and of our previous field visits in Calais, Dunkirk, and Sicily, as well as the observations from the upcoming field visits in Turkey and Greece, will flow in our report to be presented at the annual session in Minsk. The committee reconvened yesterday here in Vienna to discuss the drafting of this report and related recommendations to be included in a supplementary items for your consideration in the annual meeting in Minsk, and we count on your support for this supplementary item. The views of committee members are, of course, at times divergent, reflecting different personal and national perspectives. Nevertheless, working atmosphere was excellent, and a number of common observations have emerged, of a few of which I will mention here. Last year saw yet a record number of arrivals in Europe as well as deaths. Indeed, over 5,000 human beings perished while attempting to cross the Mediterranean. Over 360,000 made it across alive, and thousands are living in a state of uncertainty in either camps or close detention facilities, mainly in Greece and Italy, but also in Serbia. New policies and procedures have been introduced over the past years by the European Union, with some notable results, namely the significant drop in illegal migration from Turkey to Greece after the March 2016 agreement. This has been accompanied by a reduction in deaths along the eastern Mediterranean. Turkey, which continues to host the greatest number of refugees in the world, with about 3 million, mostly Syrian refugees, has taken important steps to ensure their access to education and employment. However, facilities in Greece, especially those on the islands, are severely overburdened, and conditions are generally dismal. The EU-Turkey deal necessitates full compliance by both sides in order not to collapse, which could trigger a new wave of migration to Greece. The planned resumption in March of transfers back to Greece of asylum seekers from other EU countries will also compound the current humanitarian crisis. Migration flows continue unabated across the central Mediterranean to Italy, despite efforts to seize boats and combat human smuggling. Unfortunately, the most rapidly growing business all over the world, a business of millions of dollars, or euros if you prefer. Still, there has been no drastic overhaul of the international community's approach to migration. A handful of frontline countries continue to bear a disproportionate share of the responsibilities. The EU's quota system for the relocation of asylum seekers to other European countries is clearly not working, in large part due to lack of political will by member states. The resettlement scheme for helping displaced people from outside of the EU has benefited nearly 14,000 persons since 2015, but is still below target. Returns and repatriations have also been very slow. There is a need for major reform of the EU asylum procedures. The failure to properly investigate family claims and the lengthy process of family reunification under the Dublin III regulation has prompted thousands of unaccompanied minors to disappear and to try to reach their relatives, often with the help of smugglers. Initiatives to tackle migration upstream in partnership with third countries have also been announced, with the identification of 5 priority countries in Africa and increased funding for the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa. Most recently, in Valletta, measures were announced to address illegal migration from Libya, which accounts for 90% of arrivals in Italy. The aim of current European policy seems to be to shift the crisis back to the countries of transit or origin. Often, governments do the minimum out of the fear that any improvement in their treatment of migrants will act as a magnet. We build walls and detention centers, we talk of opting out and pushing back. Migrants have become commodities to be traded in exchange for funding. While it is important to differentiate between refugees and migrants, we should also bear in mind that distinctions are not always clear-cut. Today, migrants could become tomorrow's refugees. Efforts to fight illegal migration and to encourage voluntary returns are certainly to be welcomed. However, restrictive migration policy mainly enrich smugglers. Until we address the root causes of migration, as well as the economic factors driving smuggling and devise measures to support local communities and provide support for alternative livelihoods, our efforts will not achieve sustainable results. What is also lacking is the creation of new legal channels for migration. While opinions differ on whether Europe should encourage migration from Africa, we can certainly agree on the need to improve mechanisms to protect the most vulnerable migrants. The particular challenges faced by women and girls on the migration route should also be kept in mind. Indeed, gender-sensitive policies, programs and services will help to ensure that all refugees and migrants are safe and able to integrate successfully into their new societies. Dealing with the migration crisis also means addressing the crisis of institutions dealing with migration. We speak about a management crisis rather than a migration crisis, and seeking ways to improve coordination and communication between the various international actors engaged in this field. Better communication and cooperation is also needed at transnational level. For instance, in the sharing of information on unaccompanied and separated minors and the verification of family claims. Cooperation is also needed on the issues of dead or missing migrants, where the establishment of a centralized data bank, not such a complicated issue in the cyber era we are living in. A centralized data bank would contribute to the identification of missing migrants and a dignified management of remains. As one of us interlocutors in Brussels pointed out, migration crisis has become the new normal. There is regrettably no end in sight to the war in Syria, nor any weakening of the desperation and determination of inhabitants of the African continent, which is experiencing a population boom, to earn more to sustain their families. We need to develop a new long-term strategy to deal with migration with respect, the dignity of the human rights and the person involved. Surely we can agree on certain shared principles of humanity and common solutions beyond short-sighted measures such as building barriers and dismantling camps. This is the task also of the OSCE. This is the task of our Parliamentary Assembly in supporting the OSCE and member states, participating states' efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on quickly to the next ad hoc working group. It's Ken Tarstedt from the working group on Belarus. Please.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I would shortly like to give you a briefing of the activities that's taken place since last we met. In December, I went to Minsk together with ODIHR, Tana de Solueta and Jean-Pierre Fröhlich, and to deliver or hand over the final report. And I want to say that I think this is the new way we are working together with ODIHR, which is very good, that actually the PA is not part of just delivering the preliminary report immediately after the elections, but actually that we are invited to join ODIHR to go to the countries afterwards with the final report. During that meeting in December, we were received by the President himself, and we also had meetings with the Central Election Commission, the chairwoman, Yermoshina, and also with a new interagency working group that will continue to work with recommendations by OSCE ODIHR, what kind of expectations we have to improve the electoral code, etc. in Belarus. So actually at the time when we visited and handed over the final report, it was the first day of work for this interagency working group. I think when it comes to the election observation missions, like in Belarus, where we find a lot of shortcomings, I think it's extremely important that we have stamina and continue to do the follow-up. And in order to do that, we have this working group, which I have been given your trust in leading. And in order to continue that work, besides the visits to Minsk and the dialogue with President, Foreign Minister, Election Commission, the Parliament, the Belarusian OSCE delegation, etc., I decided to host and invite to a roundtable discussion here in Vienna. And that took place a few weeks ago, the 3rd of February. And during that roundtable discussion, I invited the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Belarus. I invited the Council of Europe, European Parliament, United States, Euronest, and several other, Nordic Council, Baltic Parliamentary Assembly. And the mission, by arranging that roundtable discussion, was actually to compare notes. How are we relating to Belarus and what we are seeing in Belarus? And it's not in any purpose to actually have a united position on how we work with Belarus, because we are actually very different multilateral structures, etc. However, I worked in interactive way with the Belarusian side, both the opposition and the governmental side, human rights organizations, and I feel we are working very inclusively. We have high expectations of this coming year in Belarus. We will have the summer session taking place in Belarus, in Minsk this summer, but of course we expect results of this interagency working group on the Belarusian side. We also see some positive signs that they actually listen to the voices that are concerned about the death penalty in Belarus, and they started some kind of initial stages for a working group in the Parliament of Belarus. Of course, finally, I want to say that when we are all coming to Belarus this summer, I think we should seize this opportunity to have a lot of discussions about matters that is close to us, about democracy, human rights. I think we should use this opportunity to have an interaction with a broad part of the Belarusian society. And I also finally would like to say that I recognize also the good spirit in which I have been able to work with the Belarusian side, all from the president to the parliament and the Central Election Commission. They have all been very open, and I have been able to have all the meetings that I have requested for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, are there any comments regarding those above-mentioned ad hoc committees? Yes, please.
Madam Chair, thank you for the floor. I would like to express my opinion being a member of ad hoc committee for migration. I would like to congratulate you for choosing the chair of that committee, because Mr. Lombardi is leading it very well. And we are working very hard, and we have
see places where are hot places of migration, and to communicate with a lot of organizations which are leading the migration flow. And what I agree absolutely is that if we want to do the migration flow, we must manage it, and we must use positive things of migration, and we must look at this point of view not only from human rights, from both sides, citizens and migrants, but for economical and security reasons. And I would like to express a lot of thanks to Mr. Lombardi that he wants to do objective view on migration. And what else I would like to add, and we discussed about that yesterday evening, is that we are a community of 57 states, and our committee concentrates on one part of migration, because migration is a global thing. It's not only in Europe, and I know that Europe is just now hot top thing because it's quite new for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There is another comment. Yes, please, from Belarus.
Всегда открыты взаимоположительному диалогу с руководством Ассамблеи и всеми заинтересованными депутатами. Хорошим примером такого конструктивного диалога и взаимодействия являются регулярные плодотворные контакты между депутатами Национального собрания Республики Беларусь и заместителем председателя нашей Ассамблеи, уважаемым Кентом Харстетом в последние годы. Вместе с тем мы считаем, что для
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, we move on now to another ad hoc committee, our ad hoc committee that has traditionally served as a focal point for parliamentary engagement with the governmental side, the ad hoc committee on transparency and reform of the OSCE. It has been dormant in recent years. I think that we should perhaps see if we can revive this group, which has been a useful tool in the past. If you agree, however, given current circumstances and our strengthened cooperation, I would propose to adjust the name to the Ad hoc Committee on Strengthening OSCE Engagement through Transparency and Reform. So there is a little change. I I will also discuss with colleagues and the Secretariat about appropriate membership for this committee. We now move on to the special representatives. I would now like to give the floor to the special representative on anti-terrorism, Mr. Kovalev. Please, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, уважаемые коллеги. Но мы не можем с вами допустить, чтобы международный терроризм преобразовал вывихнутое столетие и наш 21 век. Какая же стратегия нам нужна, чтобы о терроре вспоминали разве что в школьных учебниках? Кстати, отчет подробный в письменной форме я представил в секретариат. Каждый может с ним ознакомиться, поэтому я очень коротко изложу свои размышления просто выборочными тезисами. Первое. Борьба государств-членов Ассамблеи с терроризмом должна принести незыблемую уверенность нашим народам, что политическое время приобретает стабильность, сообщество Ассамблеи становится сплоченным, объединенным нашими общими ценностями и целями. Второе. Борьба с терроризмом, в первую очередь с вожаками международного террора, должна демонстрировать рост экономики, свободной от террористической зависимости во всех сферах деловой жизни. Третье. Борьба с терроризмом – это условие благополучия финансового рынка, неудручаемого криминальными капиталами, которые накапливаются лидерами террора благодаря нефтедолларам, наркотрафику, торговле людьми, торговле предметами искусства, другим махинациям. Четвертое. Борьба с терроризмом – это один из важных факторов поддержания гендерного равноправия. Борьба с терроризмом – это следование призыву Теодора Рузвельта, обращенного против пола. Я хочу это подчеркнуть. Злом. Пора свести эти тенденции на нет, приступить к ведению борьбы с террористами на опережение. Мы просто с вами обязаны так поступить. Мы, если только захотим, способны совершить чудо. Парламентская ассамблея ОБСЕ – это мощнейший межконтинентальный сгусток гуманной энергии. Я призываю ассамблею задать тон в борьбе с международным терроризмом, стать политическим лидером в разрешении данной проблемы. Политики и разногласия в политике, которые демонстрируют лидеры наших стран в различных аспектах, не должны мешать нашей общей борьбе с терроризмом. При достижении поставленных целей нам необходимо быть патриотами своей цивилизации и прежде всего оптимистами. Мы, политики, должны верить в себя, в свои силы, верить в то, что наши замыслы и практику борьбы с терроризмом поддержит народ, интересы которого мы представляем на европейской арене. И если вожаки террора признают себя и придуманную ими человеконенавистническую идеологию исключительными, то мы обязаны признать свою демократическую исключительность над массовыми убийцами и насильниками. Мы, парламентарии государств, членов Ассамблеи, способны сами моделировать собственное будущее, свободное от любых террористических посягательств. Если мы этого не сделаем, сами наше будущее, будущее последующих поколений смоделируют без нас. Спасибо за внимание. Я желаю всем членам Ассамблеи успехов в этом непростом пути. Мы с вами показывали во многих аспектах пример и показывали, как безопасность и сотрудничество в Европе должны на самом деле организовываться. Мы показывали пример другим парламентским ассамблеям. Мне кажется, что в этом наша с вами миссия. Я очень надеюсь, что на этом пути нас ждет успех, и желаю всем нам и каждому из нас успеха на этом длинном и сложном границы служили, границы между странами и государствами служили надежным оплотом и защитой от террора. Сегодня эти границы стали прозрачными и во многом благодаря тому, что мы называем изменившейся ситуацией в связи с наплывом беженцев, под которыми скрываются очень многие террористы, которые проникают в страны Европы, в другие страны мира с целью проведения террористических актов и воздействия на те страны, на те государства и на правительства, которые им по каким-то причинам не угодны, либо не нравятся. Поэтому очень важно выработать своевременно механизмы, противодействующие этому явлению. Сегодня создано много организаций, которые призваны бороться с террором. Но координация и взаимодействие между ними должным образом не налажены. Задача парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ – повлиять на этот процесс в лучшую сторону. Еще раз желаю всем успеха на этом трудном пути. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much. We move on from terrorism, the fight against terrorism, to mediation. Please, our special representative for mediation.
Thank you, our President, dear colleagues, friends. So, to continue the text, I would like to say that mediation is absolutely very important, but at the same time very, very cost-effective method in addressing the global and regional security challenges. It can also be effectively used in preventing, managing, resolving violent conflicts. Therefore, it is paramount important instrument in our toolbox in this organization. But so looking at the political involvements in the international affairs, we unfortunately have witnessed indications of increased level of uncertainty and unpredictability. This concerns also OSCE area, we know, and had an impact on our security environment today. Let me stress some specific themes that I pay special attention to in my mediation work within the Parliamentary Assembly. First, strengthening our preparedness for mediation and dialogue facilitation. The existing structures and working procedures of the Parliamentary Assembly provide us a good platform to base our mediation efforts on. We just have to use the full potential of what we already have. We have to remember that we are 323 parliamentarians in here representing our participating states. This means having an access to invaluable knowledge and information on what is going on in your respective countries. This, in fact, is our internal early warning system. In addition, our ad hoc groups and special representatives play an important role as well. I would like to encourage you and your delegations to inform me and the leadership of the PA about developments in security situation in your respective countries. For instance, fact-finding missions undertaken by parliamentarians can be useful in many ways. We can help, for example, in forming PA's recommendations to the governmental side of over the OSCE. Also, it is important to strengthen our mediation capacity through professional trainings. For example, we had a fruitful mediation retreat in Helsinki last May for a small group of persons representing the Parliamentary Assembly. And the Finnish delegation and I will host a side event today on the topic of human security dimension in peace mediation. As a sign of a joint effort, we have speakers representing governmental side of the OSCE, Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe as well, the Red Cross. Mediation is never one-man show. Instead, it is a joint effort where the cooperation is a key. Okay, first among us within the Parliamentary Assembly, but of course also together with the governmental side and executive sides of the organization of the mediation-related issues. Additionally, we need more cooperation and coordination with other relevant organizations dealing with mediation. We have liaised with different institutions and organizations such as United Nations, European Union, Council of Europe, and civil society organizations. I try to implement the mandate in accordance in a cooperative spirit. We have coordinated our plans and ideas as well as looked for possibilities to cooperate. I have discussed with German and Austrian chairmanship of these problems. Additionally, I want to mention the great importance the work of the OSCE field operations and OSCE Secretariat, including especially Conflict Prevention Center. Having the best knowledge on challenges faced in the field, the OSCE field missions can advise if interparliamentary dialogue could facilitate implementations of their mandates. Therefore, I have approached the Secretary General, Ambassador Zanier, as well as the heads of the OSCE field missions by informing them on the implementation of the mandate and inviting them to make use of our services wherever needed or felt appropriate. Then, as a part of the implementation of the mandate, we have actively followed the developments in the international security situation. I have paid special attention to the protracted and emerging conflicts. Of course, first, remain ready also today to continue facilitating dialogue between Ukraine and Russian parliamentarians when seen appropriate and timely. Stated. Also, we are following the developments in this regards and have expressed the readiness to support the process. In the beginning of this year, we have witnessed some encouraging steps being taken in terms of Cyprus peace talks that were held in Geneva in January. The example shows by Greek and Turkish Cypriots in putting differences aside in their attempts to find solutions to unify their country, and it sends a positive signal, of course. Dear President, dear colleagues, finally, let me conclude by expressing my deep appreciation to the Secretariat of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly for its dedicated work in supporting the success of implementing my mandate. Also, warm thanks to the leadership of the Parliamentary Assembly giving me with the full support in my work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, are there any comments on those reports? If no, then we move on. I strongly encourage all special representatives to regularly report on their activities in writing, so we can also follow their work closely without the time limitations imposed by the length of the standing committee meetings. And I really I hate to say it because I think the discussion is very fruitful, but we have to have a closer look at the time. So I would now like to give the floor to Lord Peter Bones, who chairs the Subcommittee on Rules of Procedures and Working Practices. The subcommittee has recommended amendments to the rules which have been circulated. Peter, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. The subcommittee in its revised forms met in Tbilisi and in Skopje, and there has been a report circulated to the Standing Committee which sets out in full the activities and the matters to which we have given consideration. We gave detailed attention to comments from delegations and members, and of course the recommendations in President Keneva's vision document. And I'm particularly glad to hear your comments this the OSCE, its institutions and the field missions. But I want to concentrate this morning, Madam President, on the proposals for rule changes which have been circulated to all delegations in January. They have been translated and there has been a memorandum explaining the reasons. The vast majority of the changes are technical clarifications, and the two rules, 21 and 22, which are the subject of some other amendments, the reasons for that also set out in the memorandum which accompanied the detailed proposals. And I think since they have been translated and people have had the opportunity to consider those in the appropriate languages, I will say no more about them unless anybody has a particular question to raise. I should say to the Standing Committee that we received no objections from delegations to these proposals, and therefore the Rules Committee and I would propose that these changes as circulated should be considered by the Standing Committee, indeed the heads of delegations being people who have the vote at this meeting, and if they are approved, then the changes will take place in time for the annual session in Minsk, which I think the Secretariat and members will find particularly helpful. So therefore, Madam President, I would invite the heads of delegation to support the package as circulated, and I so move.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this well-prepared rules, for this package of rules. And there is Cyprus who wants to ask the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. We will wish to commend the work of the Subcommittee of the Rules of Procedure and to welcome proposed amendments. we understand that this only constitutes a starting point in view of more substantial amendments to be prepared and put before the Standing Committee for discussion. Also, according to relevant questionnaire, more substantial amendments are expected. This should focus on greater interaction with the executive side, field missions and other bodies of the OSCE, and greater parliamentary diplomacy activity, as well as on the improvement of our Assembly's functioning, working practices and visibility. Of course, this may prove to be a difficult political exercise, which also entails financial implications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have the colleague from Romania taking the floor. Colleague from Romania, yes?
Okay. Dear Mrs. President, coming to this point, I would like to make few short remarks. Yes, I fully agree. We agree that we often face a huge burden when, according to our procedures, we have to deal with so many texts proposed, most of them having a strong political emphasis. Our time to properly analyze and react could sometimes be insufficient. What I would like to stress is that the present proposal regarding Rule 21, Paragraph 1, Rule 22, Paragraph 1, is focused on the effects, I mean the very many amendments, and not on the causes that generated them, I mean the proposed draft resolution. At the same time being, at least in my view, much more restrictive for our free expression, as we may face long resolution that require many amendments to adjust them in line with our political view. This may put at risk our capacity to properly react. On the other hand, I understand that now is too late to turn back this very timely debate by reconsidering this idea, but I thought it would be useful to point out this aspect to be considered for the future, and in this respect I'm considering the possibility to develop it with a specific intervention during our next plenary session this summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our colleague from Belgium, please.
Oui. Merci Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais aussi intervenir sur la proposition sur l'amendement numéro sur le 22 qui dit que donc l'initiative des membres des parlementaires est restreinte, donc on ne pourrait que introduire 4 amendements pour les supplementary items et résolutions qui sont présentées par les rapporteurs. Je crois que là, on risque vraiment d'atteindre à la possibilité des membres des parlements d'améliorer un texte. Je comprends bien que, bon, faire 20 ou 30 amendements, c'est parfois difficile, et surtout si ce sont des amendements qui n'ajoutent rien. Les amendements, c'est vraiment pour améliorer un texte, pour qu'on puisse aussi adopter le texte. Donc, je ne suis pas vraiment en faveur de cette restriction. Je crois qu'on doit vraiment réfléchir si c'est une bonne idée de le faire comme ça. En outre, je crois que si on veut vraiment, on va alors le faire d'une autre manière. Hein. Si moi, je ne peux introduire que 4 amendements, je vais demander à d'autres membres du Parlement d'introduire 4 autres amendements. Donc, ce n'est pas vraiment une solution. Mais peut-être voir si il y a beaucoup d'amendements, si on pourrait les diviser entre amendements techniques sur lesquels ce n'est pas vraiment nécessaire de faire un tout grand débat et d'adopter les amendements techniques ou de les rejeter de manière plus facile, et d'autre part les amendements qui touchent au fond d'un texte et sur lesquels on doit faire un débat. Merci.
Thank you. Azerbaijan, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I have one technical question concerning the Rule 22, which says that a sponsor of an amendment, or in the absence of a sponsor, any member may move an amendment. I want to ask, what do you mean by saying any member? Is it the member of the signing amendment, or is it the member of the assembly? According to my understanding, it is not enough clear here. What are you talking about? So, Mr. Lord Burns, if you make some clarification on that matter, I will be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter, do you want to comment on the suggestions?
Thank you very much, Madam President. Can I just take the interventions that have been made in order? I'm grateful to our colleague from Cyprus for his welcome to the proposals that are put forward. And yes, indeed, there will be, I imagine, further proposals brought forward which may involve more fundamental changes than are on the table today. And those of you who have read the report that was circulated will know that we had a very interesting proposal from Cyprus about the procedures that should be followed, and the Secretariat are looking at that and at other suggestions. It's always going to be a balance between allowing people unrestricted rights to produce amendments and allowing the Assembly time to debate current issues. Our colleagues from Romania and Belgium and Azerbaijan have referred to Rules 21 and 22. I would ask delegations to approve the changes that have been put forward. I'd emphasize that this is not the end of a story. The subcommittee would be very happy to receive alternative proposals for consideration at future meetings. And I would say to our colleague from Belgium, I understand entirely what she's saying, but we did find in Tbilisi a really excessive number of amendments to draft resolutions. As my memorandum said, 85 to the rapporteur's report and 40 to the resolution of the third committee. And I think, if I may be candid, the rapporteurs put in an enormous amount of work in producing carefully thought through and drafted resolutions. And whilst in no way wanting to restrict people's ability to contribute and debate, frequently the amendments which we end up debating are saying what the rapporteur has already said, but in a different way, and really do not add to the significant substance of the report. Now, I don't suggest for 1 minute that our solutions are perfect. As I say, this is going to be a rolling program of constant change, of change in circumstances, and when we get to working practices as opposed to detailed rules, then there will be some very careful thought have to be given both by the subcommittee and by this Standing Committee. Azerbaijan raised one particular question. I believe that the Rules Committee took the view that if an amendment came up on an agenda at a particular point in time and that the sponsor of that amendment was not there, then another member who was present could put forward the amendment. A member of the Assembly, of course, not a member from anywhere. So I just do make a plea, particularly to our colleague from Belgium. These are important to get through for the smooth working in Minsk. As I say, nothing is ever the final word, but I would appeal to heads of delegations to support this as a package and to agree. So as I have already done, Madam President, I move them en bloc. Clearly, if there is one particular amendment that a particular member feels very, very strongly about, then we will need to vote on that separately from the rest. But I think we should be clear that we have a vote on the package all told, or the package minus whatever is being objected, which we can then address and take another vote to see whether or not we have the requisite majority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We very much appreciate your work and the work of the subcommittee. And as you heard, there will be proposals to come in the time of the next years or in the time of the month. And it is certainly a work in progress. And but I think it is a first step, as Peter said, for smooth working in Minsk. So the subcommittee now proposed and has suggested that the amendments are adopted as a package. Are colleagues happy to approve all the opposed amendments together? Are there any objections to the amendments? So the amendment is adopted. Thank you very much for your work, and certainly we will continue to have all these ideas and changes that you brought forward have in mind. Thank you very much.
Can I just say to the members of the Standing Committee, thank you very much for your cooperation in this matter. It's not the end of the story, and we'll be very happy to receive other representations for consideration at future meetings. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you very much. And in accordance with Rule 45, the agreed changes will come into force 30 days from now on. So we come to the next point, which is the report by the Treasurer of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And dear Doris, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. President, very much. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's final fiscal year 2015-16 ended on 30th September of last year. As I informed the Bureau in Hamburg last December, we have finalized the year on target, meaning that we have basically spent 100% of our approved budget, finishing the year with a financial income that amounts for a total of 70,000 euros in savings. Our total income over expenditures and reserve allocations will be of 30,000 euros. The Secretary General and his staff have ensured that the management of our budget complied with the reflected the efforts of our national expenses and remain within our objectives of austerity and accountability in the use of our taxpayers' money. In this context, and given the high number of activities, I would like to commend Roberto Montella and the International Secretariat for the very efficient and cost-effective way they operate. I also very much welcome the work of the Secretary General Montella to more modernize the International Secretariat. I appreciate in particular the focus that Roberto and Gustavo have put on transparency and accountability by drafting together new financial rules and regulations that will be presented soon. I also appreciate that the fact that Secretary General Montella and the finance team spent a full day with me last spring to present me in detail the draft budget for the current year, and for that current year then, and I look forward to welcoming them again in April for finalizing the draft budget for 2017 to 18. In accordance with the rules, I present to the Standing Committee now the audited accounts of the Assembly for the past financial year. Attached to this report, you will find the report of our external independent professional auditors of the past fiscal year 2015-16, including the income and expenditure statement for the last year, which runs from October 1st until September 30th. The report, as you can see, gives a positive assessment on our financial management, and the audit once again did not result in any qualification. The list of national contributions for this fiscal year that started October 1st, 2016 is attached. Please note that as of February 22nd, we have received over 80% of our annual budget. Prompt payment makes our budgetary process easier and more efficient. It is noteworthy that in the last financial year, all but one delegation paid their dues to our Assembly. In accordance with Rule 41, paragraph 4, national contributions to the budget of the Parliamentary Assembly shall be appointed according to the formula used to divide the cost of the intergovernmental OSCE. We continue to follow closely the negotiations here in Vienna regarding the OSCE scales of contribution. The current scales of contribution to the OSCE and OSCE-PA are neither rational nor balanced, if you look a little bit closer. A new system should be agreed upon. As we discussed thoroughly in Hamburg, given the practical impossibility of amending the current OSCE-PA rules of procedure to establish a new system for the scales of contribution in the PA, it is recommended to maintain the link between the Assembly and the governmental side of the organization regarding the appropriating of the total budget. But actually, if you see what the little country of Andorra is paying in comparison to others, it starts to look very ridiculous. I will start preparing my proposal for the Assembly's budget for the next fiscal year together with the Secretary General and his staff. At the meeting of the Bureau in Copenhagen on April 24th, 2017, well, coming up, I will present to the Bureau, as it is customary, my draft proposal for the 2017-18 budget. After receiving the Bureau's feedback and hopefully the approval, I will circulate the draft budget to the Standing Committee no later than June 5th. This is in compliance with the Rule 41, paragraph 2, which ensures that the Treasurer provides sufficient time for members of the Standing Committee to study the proposed budget carefully before its adoption. I warmly thank delegations for assisting our work with extra budgetary contributions. These contributions will make it much easier for us to stay within budget while also continuing to expand our activities. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank once again the Danish Parliament for its important financial contribution in providing for our offices in Copenhagen and assisting with the payment for technical equipment. I'm also very grateful to the Austrian government, which provides assistance for our liaison office in Vienna and is our host tonight once again at the Parliament. A very big thank you to the Italian government for seconding a very valuable staff person in Copenhagen and for initiating in May a secondment for a professional officer in our Vienna office. My gratitude also to all those member parliaments that have hosted and will host assembly meetings and events. The Assembly functions in an extremely cost-effective way, but we need the contribution, support, and solidarity of national delegations to ensure that the Assembly can continue its program of activities and especially our meetings. And therefore, once again, thank you to Andorra, which is not the biggest state within our area, for hosting the autumn meeting this year. And by the way, thank you also to Kyrgyzstan, which will host our autumn meeting next year. I believe there is a need for more involvement, and I encourage those parliaments that have not yet hosted the Assembly to do so in future. And please let me state on this point, or actually remind you, that there will be a special seminar once again in Germany from 5th to 8th May in Leinsweiler, and the invitation should get out pretty soon to you, and I certainly hope that quite some of you will come, because there we discuss frozen conflicts and especially what's happened in the lately, coming back to more nationalistic politics in the world that may endanger security and peace. Let me conclude by stating once again my full support for the efforts being made by the Secretary General Roberto Montella and his staff to draft and introduce a set of financial rules and regulations for the Assembly. I'm convinced that having such a set of regulations together with a new budget approach will enhance our financial capacity, ensuring even more transparency and accountability. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Doris, for the work. Financial work is never easy, so thank you very much for that. Are there any comments? No? Then we move on to the next point, which is the report by our Secretary General, Roberto Montella. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. I've circulated the report, so I will not walk you through the entire report, but just limit myself to highlighting 4 points. One on the internal reform process, one on election observation, one on the Mediterranean dimension, and one on the situation of the OSCE and the current appointment of new leaders in the institutions of the OSCE. But before doing so, Madam President, I would like to say a word about the nature of this meeting and its participation. This meeting has proved to be one of the most successful meetings, one of the most popular meetings. I'm talking about the winter meeting. This year we have 55 delegations participating. We have 5 partners countries. We have around 500 participants. So I really would like to welcome you for participating in these big numbers. This is a particularly happy occasion also because I would like to welcome the Uzbek delegation here. As you have outlined, they have not been with us since 2003, so it's a big pleasure to have them here. And I would like also to stress your work, Madam President, the meeting you had with the foreign minister of Uzbekistan, encouraging them to come back, but also the work that Lord Bones has done with the Uzbek ambassador in London, and the work of Azerbaijan and Azayguliev in making contact at a higher level with the Uzbek authorities. All of these efforts have proved very useful, and we have the result that we have today. This winter meeting is an occasion for the parliamentarians also to interact with their ambassadors, with the governmental side, and this is something very positive, and we very much appreciate that you will hear tomorrow also reports from the heads of the different committees committees, the permanent council committees that will come and present their ideas about what they will do. But this is also the occasion when the parliamentary dimension meets the governmental dimension. And on this word, I would like to use the words of the last CIO, Minister Steinmeier, who is now President-elect Steinmeier. In his opening remarks at the ministerial meeting in Hamburg, besides praising your work, Madam President, he also said that the OSCE is not only the chair, and here I quote, not only the participating states or the secretariat here in Vienna, but it also is, and he said, it includes the Parliamentary Assembly, which is very highly regarded as the democratic backbone of our system, especially as regards election observation. So he called the Parliamentary Assembly the democratic pillar of our system, and I think this is something that we have to be proud of and try to maintain. On the 4 points, on the reform process, you have gone extensively. I will not say much more than that. My idea was in the first 6 months to set up staff rules and a code of conduct for our staff. This is in place since July. It's working well. Our staff has now cadre de référence, let's say, some basic rules under which they are employed by the Assembly, not by the Secretary General, and they have some more security. On the issues of financial rules and regulations, we have talked about it in Skopje already. It is my intention to give this Assembly some benchmarks on which you can judge the work of the Secretariat. You will see from the audited report there's a reference to the OSCE practices, but there is nothing written. It's mainly the word of the Secretary General. I think this needs to be depersonalized. There has to be something in writing, like it's the practice in other international organizations. And exactly we are doing this with Gustavo. We are looking at the example of the OSCE, of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in particular. So we will come up with a proposed set of financial rules and regulations that will then be approved by the Bureau meeting in Copenhagen, and hopefully on the 5th of July presented to the Standing Committee and becomes the basic rules on which we manage our finances. These rules are already something that we are implementing on our day-to-day life. So it's an important thing that it comes from you, and not just that it comes from the goodwill of the International Secretariat. On election observation, I will not talk too much. We've heard the reports of all the special coordinators and all the head of delegations. I thank all those who have participated in election observations. We had 7 elections in 9 weeks. This was a record after the Skopje fall meetings, but we've managed with great work from Irina, Loic, the election team, Andreas Baker, Andres Notel. So I'd like to thank all the staff who has worked, and of course all the members who have provided leadership or who have gone very far away to observe elections. One aspect of elections, it's been outlined by Kent Arsted, that we are developing now with very good cooperation with the ODIHR, is the follow-up. So we've always done just the observation, pre-electoral visits. Now we are trying to reinforce also the aspect of follow-up, mainly with the presentation of the ODIHR final report, and this is presented to the authorities normally 3-4 months after, and it depends. We're not going in every country, but where we think it's important to go and also give a kind of a political blessing of the document presented by the ODIHR head of mission. Also here I would like to commend Director Link. He is no longer going to be the director of the ODIHR. He has decided to end his term, but thanks to him and thanks to the fact that he's a former politician, so he understands the needs of a body like this, and I must say that the relations have improved. Of course, I think it's not up to me to say whether we have contributed from the International Secretariat, but I think a lot of credit also goes to Michael Link and to the fact that he was much more forthcoming towards the Parliamentary Assembly, and now, I mean, it's no longer news, so I don't need to repeat it every time, but the cooperation is excellent, and we hope that with the new director of ODIHR, this cooperation will continue to be excellent. On the Mediterranean dimension, just one word very quickly. We have not been extremely active as International Secretariat in the last year. Of course, we have our forum, we have our special representative, Monsieur Voisin, who has participated in some activities, but I think it's important for this assembly also to look more carefully at the Mediterranean dimension. I was in Istanbul recently. I met with the Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, and we have discussed possibilities to interact and maybe without reinventing the wheel or without entering into the perimeters of other international organizations, but probably we can maybe find ways of cooperating more in order to maybe organize another election observation mission in one of the partner states, or maybe participate in some official visits and maybe also engaging more in the Mediterranean. This is an idea, of course, I'll launch here in the Standing Committee, but it's something that we are going to look at in the near future. Now, a final word on the OSCE situation, and then I will also give the floor to Ambassador Notelle to come more into details on that. But on these OSCE institutions, we have the Secretary General of the OSCE, the Director of ODIHR, Freedom of the Media, and the High Commissioner for National Minorities. All these positions are about to become vacant or are already vacant with an acting person. And by, I think, the beginning of July, we should have 4 new people heading these organizations. We, as a Parliamentary Assembly, of course, want the organization to be strong. But on this, I want to say 3 very few and clear concepts. The responsibility to select officials is a responsibility of the Ministerial Council, of the governmental side. The Parliamentary Assembly has no role in selecting these figures. We are not like the Council of Europe where we vote the Secretary General. We are aware that this is an intragovernmental organization. The business of choosing the individuals for this 4 positions is a responsibility of the Permanent Council, of the Ministerial Council. It's a governmental responsibility. And we are very well conscious of that, and we will not try to meddle into this. However, historically, the Parliamentary Assembly has always called for high-level political figures for these positions, because we think, as we've seen in the case of Michael Link, when you have somebody who has political experience, has capacity to pick up the phone and call a minister, this is good for the organization. It strengthens this organization. And I must say from, but Ambassador Notelle will say more, but from the names that are circulated, somehow this is something that the Parliamentary Assembly has already won, if we like to have a Parliamentary Assembly sort of stake in this. I mean, we have already won because we can see from all the candidates, somehow the level of candidature is being more and more becoming at that level of political, let's say, levature. No? However, that said, you know, that we are staying out of this and that we like higher political, we should not shy away from the fact that there are 2 senior members of our bureau, namely President Emeritus Ilkka Kanerva and Vice President Kent Arsted, who are respectively running for President, for Secretary General of the OSCE and for Director of the ODIHR. They visited me in Copenhagen. We spoke about this. Of course, we wish them well. Again, for the sake of their own campaign, I will not try to label them as PA candidates, because this would not be truthful to their history, because they're not only members of the PA, but they have a history beyond the PA and a big experience, so they should not be labeled as the PA candidates. But of course, we wish them well and they're a friend. And I thought it was better to just simply open and talk about it rather than, you know, subtly send messages and discuss this. So these are the 3 points, but Ambassador Notelle, maybe you want to add more.
Thank you very much. You all should receive my reports. They're sent to you on a regular basis. As it has been an established practice, they are a 1-page digest. That doesn't mean that there's not more to say, but they are meant as an incentive for you to ask questions and to call me and to ask for more information. I also hope that these reports are distributed to the members of your delegations, because some of them seem to be quite interested in the issues. We sometimes receive questions, and apparently the report then has not been received or probably not read. We have spoken about the results from Hamburg, and I wrote about it in my December 16 report. One of the main points is, of course, altogether the result was disappointing again. There were no decisions in the 3rd dimension. There were very meager decisions in many areas, and Filippo Lombardi has referred to one of them, namely the one on migration. And I think the members of the Committee on Migration yesterday got a good impression on about how these negotiations go and what the questions are and the reasons are why important decisions are not taken. So I don't need to go into it. One of the things that did not lead to any immediate success in Hamburg was the initiative of the German chairmanship to go more deeply into issues of disarmament and the context with confidence-building measures. But at least there was a declaration which said we will work, these are the participating states, towards creating an environment conducive to reinvigorating conventional arms control and CSBMs in Europe. We recognize the interrelation between CSBMs and conventional arms control and the wider political military context. And in order to do that, they started what they call a structured dialogue on the current and future challenges and risks to security in the OSCE area to foster a greater understanding on these issues. This has led to the creation of a new informal working group, and the day before yesterday, the chairman of the Permanent Council of last year, so the German permanent representative, was appointed as head of this working group and will follow up on this. And I think for those of you who are interested in the first dimension and in these very fundamental issues of European security, it's interesting that there is this working group, and I could imagine that some of you would like to somehow give some input in the, and I'm of course available because I will hopefully be able to participate in the meetings of this group. On the issues that were raised by the Secretary General, we still don't have a budget for 2017. We still have two field presences that have not been extended. We have the issue of all these open posts that Roberto referred to. I would just like to make one point here, because we have very little time left and I don't want to go into the details, but of course I can provide you with all the names and the deadlines, and if you need to know more. But I would say that the outcome of the selection processes will not only impact on the future of the OSCE, which is by itself already serious enough, it will certainly also impact on the relationship between the PA and the OSCE. I think this is very important to know. We have had a good period now, for instance, the excellent cooperation that we had with Mr. Link, but also the opening up of the Secretariat on the, by Secretary General Zanier. All this was very positive. In order to be able to continue this, we need to have the right people selected. And just a very little side remark on this, the PA has always requested to be involved in this, although the Secretary General has just said we don't have the right. It's true that in the current situation, it's exclusively the governmental side that is doing the selection, but we have always wanted to have a word on this. One word on the issue of legal personality, because this has also been something that has been distributed to you and sent to you by Secretary General Montella. There is this draft of a standing arrangement that is something that should replace what has not been achieved by the OSCE so far. It does include some wording on the OSCE and its members, so I see it positively. But we have to know that also there we have to be very watchful, because whatever is decided on the legal status and on legal instruments that are related to this issue will also possibly relate to the status and the role of the PA. Or to put it into different words, in the past we have not been mentioned in some of these documents, and as you can imagine, there are some people always, unfortunately, and still also in the Permanent Council, who do not see the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly as a real part of the OSCE. So we have to really watch out that whenever something like this is drafted, that the PA appears in the document. And I'm a little bit concerned. We have an excellent Austrian law on the OSCE. There is an idea to arrange or to draft, and there are already negotiations apparently going on, a host country agreement with Austria, which might replace the Austrian law, which says very clear things about the PA. I will continue to inform you about this. It is necessary always, when it comes to the PA, to have clarity, because the moment participating states start to interpret what the OSCE PA is and what its role and status is, we are in trouble. I would like to also underline that thanks to the President and to the Secretary General of the OSCE PA, we have made great steps forward in cooperating with the governmental side, and thereby enhance the understanding on that side of the value of parliamentary diplomacy. I've also seen several ambassadors and several other staff of the permanent delegations here in this room, around the table, and in other places. They, as well as their colleagues who are not here right now, will hopefully appreciate also that it does not mean that this development, that we are cooperative, does not mean that the PA is just one branch of the OSCE structures. As any branch, it remains unique, and it provides the organization with a democratic element. I mean, Roberto has taken a little bit away from my report, because this democratic backbone idea, I think it is very valuable. We are accompanying the work of the governmental side, and I think the parliamentary point is that it remains critical when it is necessary, and that it pushes for progress and is never satisfied with what has been reached. There can always be more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and thank you for your work and the work of the Vienna Liaison Office. I will conclude just with one comment. It's not up to the Secretary General to make political statements, so I will refrain from saying this. But I just wanted to make a comment on the recent debate. Will issues like terrorism, migration, frozen conflicts be dealt with more a bilateral approach rather than multilateral approach? As the Secretary General of a multilateral organization, of course, I'm a great advocate of multilateral approaches, and your big presence here, your great participation, the numbers I've said before, testimonies to the fact that despite some announcements in the press, maybe it's fake news or not, but there is a great interest in multilateral organizations like this to deal with these issues. So I very much thank you for this, and I'm ready for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Roberto and Andreas. Now, we are in 1 minute, we will be in extra time, or borrowed time, however you care to look at it. I have one speaker on the list, and that's Kent Hudstead from Sweden.
Mr. Secretary General, for his work. I remember when he was started and was newly appointed, he had a big stack of papers with different reforms he wanted to do when becoming Secretary General. And I think the document we have with these reports from Secretary General is opening up the organizations, it's more transparent, and you're doing with excellent staff. And every one of us who have different duties on behalf of the PA, I think we can only be very grateful. And under your leadership, together with your excellent staff, I just want to thank you, and I think it's shared by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kent. Well, I did say the list was closed, but I've seen our colleague from Azerbaijan, but really, and Georgia, I have to say to colleagues that the President said at the beginning of this meeting, we had to finish at 11:45 at the very latest. So please, can we have these last two contributions? I can take no other contributions, Azerbaijan and Georgia, and as briefly as possible. I'm sorry, but...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Secretary General, our friend, Mr. Roberto Mantella, first of all, for mentioning my name in the engagement of our Uzbek delegation into our work and for their participation. I'd like to welcome our friends. I think that Uzbekistan is one of the important players, one of the important country of our assembly, and their presence here is pretty much appreciated. And the second, Mr. Montello, I really appreciate your work as a Secretary General and your reforms that you put forward for the last year. I think we have to support these initiatives, and of course I do believe that in Minsk you will submit a package of proposals that you are going to do it. And of course I think that the professional team that you have, that you lead, is of course very much promising to enhance our joint activities and the joint work here. And one very small proposal concerning the new staff, new lawyer, to be engaged into the work of our secretariat. Based on my experience, I do feel that we need really lawyer specialized on the issues related to the election, to the electoral law, and the issues related to the legal matters of the observation mission. I think we have to think about that and seek for any possibility to hire some professional lawyer into the activity, into the work of the Secretary, in order to be able to assist the future and the coming election observation mission that we are going to launch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tessarelli, as briefly as you can, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say a few words, as far we are somehow assessing the report of Secretary General, and I appreciate, and I think all our members, that we see very consistent work of the Secretariat and excellent cooperation with different committees or the structures of the Parliamentary Assembly. So there was the evidence of that is a work with Lord Bonus and his ad hoc committee on regulations, and of course with our treasurer on transparency and accountability of our financial matters. And it was really the pledge from the candidate then of Roberto Montella, and we see that he is, as a Secretary General, fulfilling his promises. And I think it will be very important also to improve and to strengthen relations with different institutions of the OSCE and beyond the OSCE, which you are doing, I mean, meetings with different Secretary Generals and setting some structures of cooperation between them. It also will increase visibility of our Parliamentary Assembly. And finally, what you said, well, of course, we wish good luck to Ilka Kanerva and Kent Harsted, and I think it will be an additional, instrument for the cooperation in future, as far as to our distinguished members, colleagues, and friends could theoretically and practically occupy very high positions in the OSCE. It will give another very positive and create very positive momentum for our Assembly too. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and I think the speakers have all expressed to you, Roberto, and to your staff, the thanks of all of us for the work that you've been doing and the congratulations on what you've achieved over the last 15 months. So thank you very much, much indeed. Item 8 is future meetings of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and they are listed on the agenda. Just to remind members that the Bureau will meet on the 23rd, 24th of April in Copenhagen. The 26th annual session will be on the 5th to the 9th of July in Minsk. The autumn meeting, the 3rd to the 5th of October in Andorra de la Vella. And the Bureau will meet on the 6th of December here in Vienna in conjunction with the OSCE Ministerial Council on the next 2 days, namely the 7th and the 8th of December. I would just, on behalf of the Standing Committee, thank all the potential hosts for these meetings, ask any delegations who are considering hosting a session, please to put their name forward. And I hope, if I may address the representatives of Denmark, Belarus and Andorra, I hope, and Austria as well, I hope they will understand that time, which is not of our making, has caught up with us, We are intensely grateful to you. We're all looking forward to attending those meetings, and I fear there has to be a break with tradition on this occasion, and I cannot invite you to address the Assembly, but I assure you of our thanks so much. I declare the meeting closed.
Perfect time. Bravo.
Well, you know.